I'm a park ranger in Yellowstone. They gave me a list of rules for the unofficial trails. Welcome back to the Wilderness Protocol. What you are about to hear is a personal testimony, an account of events that took place during my third year of service as a backcountry ranger in Yellowstone National Park. The official report filed under my name reads, Successful Search and Rescue Operation. Subject recovered with minor injuries and severe dehydration. That is a lie. It is a necessary lie. A piece of paper designed to keep the world turning, and to ensure that the millions of people who visit this beautiful, terrible place every year continue to see only the beauty, and never the teeth hiding beneath the smile. My name is Leo, and this is what really happened on the trails that don't appear on any map. Before I was given the key to the backcountry gate, I thought I knew Yellowstone. I thought it was a place of predictable dangers. You learn to respect the bison, to carry bear spray, to read the weather in the clouds. You understand that the ground you walk on is a thin crust over a sleeping supervolcano. These are the knowns, the quantifiable risks you sign up for. It's a job, a dangerous one at times, but a job with manuals and procedures. My perception of reality began to fracture on a Tuesday morning in late September. The air had that sharp, clean bite of coming autumn, and the tourist season was finally winding down. My supervisor, a man named Silas, called me into his office. Silas was a Yellowstone institution. He was a man who looked like he'd been carved from the very granite of the Teton Mountains, weather-beaten, with eyes that had seen too many winters and a silence that was more profound than any noise. He'd been a ranger for over 40 years. He didn't ask me to sit. He just slid a thin, gray government-issue binder across his desk. It was unmarked. "You're ready, Leo," he said, his voice a low rumble like distant rockfall. "Ready for what, see?" I asked, picking up the binder. It felt cold. "The real park," he said, and he wasn't smiling. "The parts people don't get to see. The parts we're paid to manage." I opened the binder. Inside were hand-drawn maps of trail systems I'd never seen, designated only by letters and numbers. Sector G, Trail 4 Alpha, the Obsidian Creek Pass. None of these were on the official park survey maps. Tucked into the front sleeve was a single typed sheet of paper. It was titled, Backcountry Protocol, Unofficial Trails. "Read it," Silas commanded, his eyes fixed on me. "Read it out loud. You need to hear the words." I felt a little foolish, like a kid being made to read a textbook in front of the class, but the look on Silas's face was not one for arguing. I cleared my throat and began to read. Rule number 1. If you are on a trail after 3 p.m. and a fog rolls in that was not in the weather forecast, you are to find the nearest game trail, any game trail, and follow it downhill until you are below the fog line. Do not attempt to wait it out. Do not try to navigate back to the main path. The fog is not water vapor. I paused and looked up at him. The fog is not water vapor? What does that even mean? "It means what it says," Silas replied, his face unreadable. "Keep reading." I continued, my voice a little less confident now. Rule number 2. If you hear whistling, and you cannot identify the species of bird it belongs to, you are to stop, turn around, and walk back the way you came for exactly 100 paces without looking over your shoulder. The sound is a boundary marker. You are not welcome beyond it at that time. Rule number 3. You may encounter a woman in a long white dress, standing near the aspen groves. She will appear to be lost. She is not. Do not approach her. Do not speak to her. Do not, under any circumstances, look at her face. Keep your eyes on the ground and continue walking. She feeds on attention. A chill entirely separate from the morning air snaked its way down my spine. This was starting to sound less like a protocol, and more like a collection of ghost stories told around a campfire. "Silas, is this some kind of rookie hazing?" His stare was unflinching. "Do I look like I'm joking, son? Read the next one." Rule number 4. Along certain trails you will find small stacks of 3 flat stones known as cairns. These are not trail markers for you. They are anchors. If you find a cairn that has been knocked over, or has only 2 stones, you must fix it. Rule number 5. If you see a man sitting on a log or a rock, smiling at you from a distance, you are to immediately avert your gaze and walk away in the opposite direction. Do not make eye contact. Do not acknowledge him. Do not run. He enjoys the chase, but he despises being ignored. Your indifference is your only shield. I was reading slower now, the words feeling heavy in my mouth. Rule number 6. If you find yourself lost with no trail in sight, and you feel a sudden overwhelming sense of dread, as if you are being watched from all sides, you must stop. Close your eyes and walk backwards. Count your steps aloud. Do not stop counting until you feel the ground change beneath your feet from dirt to rock, from grass to gravel. When it changes, you may open your eyes. You will be on a marked trail again. Do not ask how. The park provides a path for those who respect its nature. I finished reading and looked at Silas. My heart was thudding a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. "This is insane," I whispered. "No," he said, standing up. "This is Yellowstone. The park is old, Leo. Older than the trees, older than the mountains. It remembers things we've forgotten how to believe in. These rules, they're not for your safety. They're for the balance. They are the peace treaty we signed with this place a long time ago. Your job isn't to fight what's out there. Your job is to not disturb it, to follow the protocol, memorize it, burn it if you have to, but never, ever break it." He took the binder from my hands, slid the single sheet of paper out, and handed it to me. "Welcome to the real park, Ranger Mercer." I spent the rest of the day in a daze. I tried to reason it away. It was a test of my psychological fortitude, a complex prank, a way to see if I was gullible. But the memory of Silas's eyes, as serious as a heart attack, kept the doubt at bay. I memorized the rules until the words lost all meaning, until they were just a strange rhythmic chant in the back of my mind. For 2 weeks, nothing happened. I did my patrols, dealt with tourists trying to pet the elk, and wrote my reports. The paper with the rules sat folded in the breast pocket of my uniform, a constant, unsettling weight. I almost managed to convince myself it was all in my head. And then the call came in. A missing hiker. It happened every year, but this one felt different from the start. His name was Julian Croft, a 22-year-old kid from California, a wannabe influencer who'd come to Yellowstone to find himself and film it for his thousands of followers. His rental car was found at a lesser-used trailhead, one that branched off towards Sector G. His last post on social media was a picture of a trail sign captioned, "Time to go where the Wi-Fi is weak and the soul is strong." Off the grid. The search was organized. Grid patterns were established. But as the first day turned into a fruitless evening, the search coordinator, a grim-faced man named Hendricks, pulled me aside. "Mercer," he said, his breath fogging in the cold. His phone last pinged from a tower that covers the eastern ridge of Sector G. "That's your territory, isn't it? The unmarkeds." I felt the paper in my pocket crinkle as I shifted my weight. "It is. Silas is out on medical leave," Hendricks continued, oblivious to the sudden cold sweat on my brow. "You know those trails better than anyone now. I need you to do a solo sweep at first light. Follow the old survey lines. See if you can pick up his trail." I wanted to refuse. I wanted to tell him that Silas was the only one who truly understood those woods, that I was just a man with a list of rules that sounded like they'd been written by a madman. But I was a ranger. Person was missing, and it was my job. "I'm on it," I said, my voice sounding much steadier than I felt. The next morning, I stood at the trailhead before the sun had even crested the horizon. The air was still and frigid. I had my pack, my radio, my bear spray, and I had the rules seared into my memory. I took a deep breath, the cold air burning my lungs, and stepped past the faded wooden sign that warned tourists unmaintained trail do not proceed. I stepped into the real park. The first few hours were unnervingly normal. The forest was beautiful, cloaked in the soft gray light of dawn. I followed a path that was little more than a whisper through the trees, looking for any sign of Juliana footprint, a dropped water bottle, a piece of brightly colored clothing. I found nothing. I checked my watch. It was 2:45 p.m. I had planned to turn back at 3 to avoid being out too late. I was on a high ridge, the trees thinning out to reveal a breathtaking panorama of the valley below. And then I felt it. A sudden drop in temperature. I looked up. The sky, which had been a brilliant, cloudless blue just moments before, was now being swallowed by a thick white bank of fog. It wasn't rolling in from the horizon. It was rising from the valley floor impossibly fast, like steam from a colossal kettle. Rule number 1. If you are on a trail after 3 p.m. and a fog rolls in, that was not in the weather forecast. My watch read 2:52. Close enough. Panic, cold and sharp, pricked at the edges of my composure. I remembered Silas's words. The fog is not water vapor. It didn't look like normal fog. It was too dense, too uniform. It moved with a purpose, climbing the mountainside with a silent, relentless hunger. I fought the instinct to stay put, to use my compass and map. I fought the urge to call it in on the radio. The protocol was specific. Find the nearest game trail and follow it downhill. I scanned the terrain. To my left, a barely perceptible track where deer or elk had pushed through the undergrowth. It was steep, treacherous, and went in the wrong direction from where I needed to go. But it went downhill. I took a breath and plunged into the thicket, the branches whipping at my face. The fog was closing in, the world dissolving into a pearlescent white. Behind me, the ridge I had just been standing on disappeared completely. It felt like an eraser was wiping the world away. I didn't run, but I moved with a speed that bordered on reckless, skidding on loose shale, my ankles twisting. The only thing in my mind was the rule. Get below the fog line. After what felt like an eternity, the ground began to level out and the trees grew thicker again. I broke through a final wall of branches and found myself in a small, damp hollow. The air here was clear. I looked up. Above me, the fog hung like a solid ceiling, a churning white canopy that blocked out the sun. I had made it. I was below it. I leaned against a tree, gasping for breath, my heart hammering against my ribs. I had followed the rule, and I was alive. But the relief was short-lived, replaced by a new creeping dread. The rule was real, which meant the others probably were, too. I checked my radio. Static. My GPS was spinning, unable to find a signal. I was truly on my own. I had no choice but to keep moving, hoping this new path would eventually lead me somewhere recognizable. As I walked, a new sound reached me, a faint melodic whistling. It was a simple 3-note tune repeated over and over. It was beautiful, haunting, and utterly alien. I've been a birder my whole life. I know the calls of the chickadees, the warblers, the finches. This was none of them. It was too pure, too perfect. Rule number 2. If you hear whistling, and you cannot identify the species of bird it belongs to, you are to stop, turn around, and walk back the way you came for exactly 100 paces without looking over your shoulder. My blood ran cold. The whistling wasn't coming from a specific direction. It was just there, in the air, around me. It felt like the trees themselves were producing the sound. My training screamed at me to find the source, to identify the potential threat. But the memory of Silas's face, the weight of the protocol, was stronger. I stopped. I closed my eyes for a second, then turned my back on the direction I had been heading. 1. I whispered, my voice hoarse. I began to walk, each step deliberate, my boots crunching on the damp earth. The whistling continued, seeming to grow a little louder, a little more curious. 2, 3, 4. I kept my eyes fixed on the path in front of me, fighting the overwhelming urge to glance back. It felt like a physical presence at my back, a question mark hanging in the air. 56, 57. The whistling warped, just for a second, sounding less like a bird and more like a distorted recording. 98. 99, 100. I stopped. The whistling was gone. The silence that rushed in to fill the void was somehow more menacing. I stood there for a full minute before daring to turn around. The path ahead looked exactly the same, but it felt different. The air was lighter. I had followed the rule. The boundary had been respected. I continued on this new bearing for another hour, the forest growing denser, the light beginning to fail. The trees here were mostly aspens, their white trunks standing like an army of silent sentinels. And it was there, in a clearing dappled with the last of the evening light, that I saw her. A woman standing with her back to me, wearing a long simple white dress. Her hair was dark, cascading down her back. She stood perfectly still. Rule number 3. You may encounter a woman in a long white dress. Do not approach her. Do not speak to her. Do not, under any circumstances, look at her face. Every instinct I had as a search and rescue officer screamed at me. A lone woman, improperly dressed for the wilderness, standing motionless. She could be hypothermic, in shock, injured. She could be a victim. My duty was to help her. But the protocol was absolute. She hadn't moved. She didn't seem to have noticed me. I remembered the words. She feeds on attention. I lowered my gaze, focusing on the muddy ground at my feet. I began to walk, making a wide arc around the clearing. I could feel her presence like a static charge in the air. I could feel her not turning, and that was somehow worse. It meant she already knew I was there. My heart was a frantic drum in my chest. Don't look up, Leo. Don't look up. I was almost past the clearing when I heard a soft weeping sound. It was a sound of pure, heartbreaking sorrow. It tore at every decent fiber of my being. My pace faltered. My eyes started to lift. Don't look at her face. Silas's voice was a thunderclap in my memory. I clenched my jaw so hard my teeth ached, and I forced my gaze back to the dirt. I walked faster, breaking into a half-jog, not stopping until the sound of her crying faded behind me, replaced once again by the oppressive silence of the woods. I didn't know if I had passed a test or failed a human being. The uncertainty was a poison. Night fell fast in the deep woods. I had to make camp. I found a small, defensible overhang, built a small, smokeless fire, and ate a tasteless protein bar. I didn't sleep. I sat with my back against the rock, listening to the sounds of the forest, trying to convince myself they were normal. Just after midnight, I found the first real clue. Not far from my camp, caught on a thorny bush, was a small black piece of fabric, a torn piece of a high-tech athletic shirt. And next to it on the ground was a small stack of 3 flat stones. A cairn. I knelt, my flashlight beam trembling, and my stomach plummeted. There were only 2 stones. The top one was missing, lying in the dirt a few feet away. Rule number 4. If you find a cairn that has been knocked over, you must fix it. Julian had been here. The idiot. He must have seen the cairn and, in his ignorance, knocked it over. Kicked it, maybe. A small act of disrespect. A tiny disruption in this ancient, fragile peace treaty. And now I had to fix his mistake. The stone must come from the ground within arm's reach. I scanned the area. There were plenty of rocks. I found one that was roughly the same size and shape as the others. Picked it up. It felt cold and heavy, unnaturally so. Do not use a stone you brought with you. I instinctively checked my pockets. Nothing. Good. I carefully placed the stone on top of the other 2, restoring the small tower. It looked right. Then, feeling like a complete fool, I leaned in close. As it was, so it is, I whispered. The moment the words left my lips, the air shifted. It was subtle but undeniable. A tension I hadn't even been fully aware of seemed to dissipate. The woods felt neutral again. It was as if I had apologized on Julian's behalf, and the apology had been accepted. I realized then that the rules weren't just superstitions. They were interactions. They were the language of this place. Re-energized by a sliver of hope, I pushed on, using the direction of the broken cairn as my new search vector. A few hundred yards later I found his backpack, discarded by the base of a massive pine tree. And inside, still charged, was his phone. My first instinct was to call from my position, but there was still no signal. I opened his video gallery, hoping for a clue. The last video he took was 18 seconds long. I pressed play. The video was shaky, filmed in selfie mode. Julian's face filled the screen, grinning, his breath fogging. "Yo, what's up guys, day 2 out in the wild," he said, laughing. "Just found the weirdest dude out here. Check this out." He flipped the camera around. It pointed towards a figure sitting on a fallen log about 50 feet away. It was a man, dressed in old-fashioned ranger clothes. But the colors were all wrong, faded and washed out. He was just sitting there, staring. And he was smiling. A wide, fixed, unnatural grin. Rule number 5. If you see a man sitting on a log or a rock, smiling at you from a distance, you are to immediately avert your gaze and walk away. "Dude's been watching me for like 10 minutes, Julian said on the video, his voice laced with mocking amusement. Not saying a word. Just smiling. Creepy, right? Hey buddy. You lost." The man on the log didn't respond. He just kept smiling. The video ended. My blood turned to ice. Julian hadn't just acknowledged him. He'd talked to him. He'd filmed him. He had broken the most serious rule on the list. He had invited the monster to the party. I knew then that I wasn't looking for a lost hiker anymore. I was walking into a trap. I could hear a river nearby. Following the sound, I came to the edge of a ravine. A fast-moving creek churned below. And on the other side I saw him, Julian. He was standing there, facing away from me, looking down into the water. "Julian!" I shouted, my voice hoarse. He turned slowly. It was him. Same face, same jacket. But his eyes, they were empty. Vacant. And his mouth was pulled into a tight, thin line. It wasn't a smile. It was the absence of one. "Help me," he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "I'm lost." I looked for a place to cross. A fallen log spanned the ravine about 20 yards upstream. "Stay right there, Julian. I'm coming to get you." I started making my way towards the log bridge, my eyes fixed on him. And then from the trees behind Julian, another figure emerged. It was the man from the video. The smiling man. He walked with a strange, gliding motion, his feet seeming to not quite touch the ground. He came to stand next to Julian, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. And he smiled that same wide, predatory grin, his eyes locking directly onto mine from across the ravine. He enjoys the chase, but he despises being ignored. I froze halfway to the log. My heart seized in my chest. I had made eye contact. I had acknowledged him. The smiling man's grin widened, impossibly so. He raised a hand and beckoned to me, a slow, deliberate curl of his fingers. And then Julian spoke again, but this time the voice was not his own. It was a layered, discordant sound like several voices speaking at once. And it said my name. "Leo," it rasped, the sound seeming to come from the smiling man, from Julian, from the very air around them. "We've been waiting for you." Panic, pure and absolute, finally broke through my training. I turned and ran. But it was too late. The forest around me was no longer silent. It was filled with noise. The whistling from before, but now it was a cacophony, 100 different tunes all at once. The sound of a woman weeping, coming from every direction. And laughter. A deep guttural laughter that shook the very ground. I was surrounded. I was lost. And a profound, soul-crushing dread washed over me. I felt 1,000 unseen eyes on me. I was being watched. I was being judged, and I had failed. Rule number 6. If you find yourself lost, you must stop. Close your eyes and walk backwards. It was the rule of last resort, the act of a desperate man. I stopped running. I squeezed my eyes shut so tightly I saw stars. The world went black, but the sounds only intensified. I turned around, facing the direction I had just fled, my back to whatever safety lay ahead. 1. I forced the word out, my voice a broken tremor. I took a step backward into the unknown. The laughter grew louder. 2. 3. I took another step. Something brushed against my cheek, cold and leathery. I flinched but kept my eyes shut. Leo! A voice whispered directly in my ear. It was Silas's voice. You broke the rules, son. You have to open your eyes now. It's the only way. 4. 5. 6. I chanted, shaking my head, tears streaming from my closed eyes. Don't you want to see? A new voice cooed. It was my mother's voice, a voice I hadn't heard in 10 years. I'm here, sweetie. I'm right here. 27:28. My foot landed on something soft and yielding. I almost fell. I kept going. The sounds were a whirlwind now, screams, whispers, promises, threats. The whistling tune bored into my skull. The smiling man's laughter echoed in my bones. The ground beneath my feet changed. It wasn't a subtle shift. One step I was on soft, damp earth. The next, my boots scraped against hard, loose gravel. When it changes, you may open your eyes. I took a shuddering breath and slowly, fearfully, opened my eyes. I was standing on the edge of the main park road. The sun was rising, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. A ranger truck was parked 50 feet away, its headlights cutting through the morning mist. The cacophony was gone. The forest behind me was silent. I had made it. The protocol had worked. The park had provided a path. I collapsed onto the road, my body shaking uncontrollably. I was found an hour later by another search party. They told me they found Julian. He was sitting by the creek, dehydrated and confused, with no memory of the last 2 days. The official story was that he got lost, panicked, and suffered from exposure. They never found the smiling man. They never found the woman in the white dress. They never found anything because they weren't looking for the right things. I was given 2 months of paid leave. When I returned, Silas was waiting for me. He looked older, more tired. You followed the protocol, he said. It wasn't a question. I did, I replied. But I saw him, see. I looked at him. He nodded slowly. I know. Sees everyone eventually. The protocol isn't about avoiding them, Leo. It's about surviving them. It's about resetting the board so the game can continue. I work a desk job now mostly. I coordinate searches. I file reports. I write the necessary lies. I still have the key to the backcountry gate, but I haven't used it. I don't need to. I know what's out there. Sometimes when a new ranger is assigned to the backcountry, young and full of confidence, just like I was, I call them into my office. I close the door. And I slide a thin gray unmarked binder across my desk. You're ready. I tell them, my voice a low rumble. You're ready for the real park. And I make them read the rules. Thank you for listening to this entry from the Wilderness Protocol. The woods are deep, and they hold secrets older than memory. Some things are best left undisturbed. If you made it through this report and wish to be briefed on future incidents, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Your attention helps us continue our work. Until next time, stay on the marked trails and listen to the warnings. They are there for a reason.